Hi, we're going to talk about home inspections. And question is, are they really worth it? I'm going to answer that question in just a couple of minutes. You're getting ready to buy a home in the DMV, and you got to know that a standard home inspection can miss something that could cost you thousands of dollars. Most inspectors do their due diligence, most inspectors look close, but every one of them misses something. So I want to talk to you tonight about the benefits of a home inspection, the downside of a home inspection, and answer a few questions for you along the way. All right. So if you have any suggestions, you want to know more about this, please at the end, shoot me a text, shoot me a message, and I'll get back to you. All right. So the answer to the question, are home inspections really worth it? The answer is yes. I think anybody that buys a house that doesn't do an inspection, at least a limited one, is just asking for trouble. He's ready to shoot himself or herself in the foot and various other organs of the body. Home inspection is very important. But there are things to factor in, there are things to consider, and there are things you have to know so that you don't end up at the end of that inspection going, what did I spend my money on? So the first thing you have to do is hire a competent inspector. How do you do that? Well, I would get a recommendation. Now, a lot of people have a little bit of a concern over hiring the inspector that the agent recommends. And I can see both sides of that argument. It can look like the agent is trying to keep the deal together at all costs and he hires his inspector, and that likely is going to do that. The flip side of the coin, though, is that most agents, because they're honest, they're reliable, they're looking out for the interests of their clients. So they're hiring inspectors that they've vetted, that they've used, that they've seen the reports, and they've heard how they interact. So you have to make that choice yourself. In any event, I would get a recommendation, whether it's from a friend who's recently bought a house, from your agent. Ultimately, the inspector that does your inspection is your responsibility. So if you don't like the one that the agent's recommending, or you don't like one that your friend recommended, then fine, find one. There are tons of them out there. And there are reviews. You can call and talk to them. You can get, as I said, recommendations, that sort of thing. So do your due diligence and find an inspector that you feel that you can trust. It's extremely important. And there are inspectors out there that miss things. Every home inspection that gets done is going to miss something. The question is, how serious is it? Now, what are the risks of not doing a home inspection? Well, they can be serious, they can be very expensive, and they can be very stressful. There are lots of components of a house which are very expensive to replace and even in many cases to repair. So you need to know that, and you need to know what things to look for, and you need to know what things to not pay too much attention to. A competent home inspector is going to check out largely several main areas of a house, and these are the ones you want to pay attention to most. One, of course, is the roof. He's going to check that out. The old timers used to get up on a ladder and walk the roof. A lot of inspectors don't do that anymore because of liability concerns or safety concerns and all of that. So, but you still want them to check it out. I saw an inspection done the other day where the inspector actually used a drone. And he took that drone, he was able to bring that drone in pretty close to the roof surface, get some good quality pictures, and get a really good idea of the condition of the roof. I've also seen guys use a selfie stick, a long selfie stick with their camera and take pictures that way. At any rate, you want to have the roof looked at. If the inspector doesn't even look at your roof, you got the wrong inspector. Another major area that every inspector should look at is the basement, the foundation. Now, not all houses have a basement, as you know, but every one of them has some sort of a foundation, and that needs to be looked at. Looking for cracks, looking for structural integrity, those sorts of things, making sure everything seems to be in good condition down there. It's a key point. Tens of thousands of dollars can go into repairs in a basement. Another main area that you're going to look at is the electrical system. Ideally, a house, even if it's older, has had the electrical system updated. The electrical system does wear out over time. It wears down. If you're buying a house from the 50s and it hasn't been updated, you're going to probably be doing it at some point just for your own safety. So they want to look at the electrical system and not just the panel box, not just the major components, but check out the electrical outlets themselves. Check for grounding. Make sure there are the proper outlets in the kitchen, in the bathrooms, the proper outlets that are in the sleeping areas. So those are very important things. Check out the electrical system, noting whether things are grounded properly, that sort of thing. Plumbing is another key area. Checking the water pressure, checking for areas of leaks, checking to see that some of the older plumbing is still workable, and if it isn't, what's it going to take to replace it? And then a very important area, which sometimes gets overlooked in the day-to-day of owning a house, is the grading, which can result in moisture problems. And that takes us back to the basement again. So you basically have the roof, you have the foundation or basement, you have the electrical and plumbing systems, and then you have the exterior, the grading, and any potential moisture issues. Those are the five big areas that you always want to have looked at. And then they get broken down into smaller portions of those, but those are the big areas to look at. Any significant defect in any of those areas can be expensive. A roof, depending on the size of the house, could be $12,000 or $15,000. Upgrading the electrical system, the panel box and the cable and the meter, that could be $5,000 or $6,000. Depending on the plumbing issue, that can get very expensive. So these are areas that are the major components of the house that you want to look at very closely. Now you want to understand the scope of a home inspection. First, it is not pass fail. Some people will talk about what happens if my house doesn't pass the inspection. Well, it doesn't quite work that way. There isn't a pass fail in most cases. Now, if you do have an inspection done and there's a very serious foundation issue, well, if your contingencies allow for it, you may be able to just cancel the contract there. But in most cases, the inspection itself is a learning experience. It's a way to find out about this house, and it isn't set up to be pass fail. But you do want to look at the findings very closely when it's all done. It is also not a code inspection. I sometimes hear inspectors use the word code. The problem with using code is that the code gets updated every year, every couple of years, that sort of thing. And the other thing you have to realize that even the latest codes as published by the International Building Codes are not necessarily adopted by the locality. I had a client the other day tell me about a neighbor who was building a deck, and they were following the latest building code. The county in which that deck was being built hadn't yet adopted the latest code, so they flunked it on things that the builder thought were the latest and best techniques, and they weren't. So the county made them tear it down and rebuild it because they were basing it on a slightly older building code from a year or two or three older. So it's not have anything to do with codes. Now, having said that, if you buying a house that's had some major renovations, it may have required permits, and that would require, in many cases, inspections. So, many cases, and in most of the jurisdictions, you can find out about the permit, the permitting process, the inspections that were done, all of that sort of thing. And you do want to see, if it's required, that those permits were in place, that they were completed, and that final inspections were done, and they were closed out at the end. Now, what about a termite inspection? Because that has to do with inspections of the property. Well, in most cases and most jurisdictions around here, the termite inspection is a separate clause in the contract or even a separate paragraph. So it's treated differently than the home inspection contingency. And in some of the jurisdictions, it's not even something that's potentially or practically negotiable. It is something that has to be taken care of in order for the house to get the settlement. So talk to your agent, talk to your lawyer about that, and be sure of the jurisdiction you're in and how that gets worked. But the termite inspection is generally not part of the home inspection process and is treated separately and handled separately from the findings of the home inspection. You find something wrong with the house, and I guarantee if you got an inspector and you've spent $500, $600, $700, $800 on an inspection, he's going to find things wrong. There is no perfect house. There is no house where there's nothing wrong with it. I've even seen new construction come out with a list of items as long as your arm of defects and deficiencies that need to be taken care of prior to settlement. What do you do when you find things are wrong? Well, in most cases and in most jurisdictions, depending on the contract form used, anything that the inspector found is not necessarily required to be addressed by the seller. You want to look to make sure that you weren't buying the house as is in the first place. But even if you aren't, there is, in most cases, no requirement for the seller to fix anything you find. So generally speaking, it is negotiable. In most cases, a seller is not going to want to spend a lot of money. He's probably already spent a good bit of money on the house fixing up, if he's updated the kitchen, the baths, if he's had the floors refinished, that sort of thing. So the seller's often spent a good bit of money. He's often, especially in a market where things have changed a little bit, agonized over what price, and he's looking at how much he's going to walk away from, or he's looking at how much money he's going to walk away with at the end of the sale. So the thing to remember here is that the seller is not going to be terribly anxious to fix things, especially things that might have become or that might be costly to do so. A big mistake that first-time buyers may do is they get this inspection report and they're worried to death about all the things that have been found, and they'll try to get the seller to go ahead and fix everything. Now, that's not going to happen. A lot of the things that do show up on the report are minor sorts of things, and as a buyer, you're going to take on that responsibility once you have the house. So you want to take up those things which you feel are too costly for you to take care of yourself, things that were omitted by the seller, potentially items that affect health and safety, or that might have affected your desire or decision to buy the house in the first place. Those are the things that I usually tell people to take up first and take a look at and generate a list, put it in the form of an addendum, send it to the seller, and then we start negotiating. Now, there are different ways that you can approach this. You can ask the seller to fix things. You can ask the seller to give you credits, or you can do a combination of both. And the way the jurisdictions have things set up, it's usually something that you can do quite easily and lay out on paper so that everybody understands what's being asked for. The plus of having the seller fix whatever it is for you is that you don't have to worry about it. They're going to take care of it before settlement. You move in, all is done. The downside of doing it that way is that you don't get to pick the vendor. You don't get to choose the contractor, or vet his work or see how quality it is. So some people, because of that, will opt to get a credit from the seller. Now, if you do that, the issue is going to be, did you get enough money to do it? And if it costs more than what you've gotten your credit for, then you are going to have to come out with that in your own pocket. So let's say you're figuring on a roof and you're thinking of $10,000, $12,000. If it happens to cost $15,000, then that's an extra money that you're going to have to pay. The benefit to you getting a credit, though, is you can pick your contractor. You can pick the work. You can choose the quality of what's going to get done. And that's sometimes more important than the convenience of having it done for you. Now, another thing to consider here is whether you should do additional inspections aside from simply the home inspection. You will have the right in most cases, if you've got an inspection right in the first place, to do whatever inspections you want to do. You can do the home inspection, you can do a chimney inspection, you can do a mold inspection or other environmental inspections. There are lots of different inspections you can do. And the more you know about your house, the better off you are. The downside is that every one of them costs money, and you can spend $500, $600, $700 on a home inspection. Mold inspection, if you have concerns about that, could be another few $100 plus lab fees. A radon test could be $175 or more. So they all add up. If you're willing to spend that money and you get all that information and it benefits you, then good. But not everybody wants to do that. So sometimes the approach is have your home inspector checks things out. And if he raises a red flag, then there might be the need to bring in a second inspector, a more specialist, and get it taken care of that way. However, in that case, you might have to get an extension of whatever time period you have. So that's something you might have to work with the seller on. Now, a little bit more on inspectors. I work in the 3 jurisdictions here, DC, Maryland, Virginia, and each one of them is slightly different. Virginia and Maryland do have licensure requirements. There's an educational component, there's a testing component, and a licensure component. And both jurisdictions require that the license gets renewed every 2 years, and there is a continuing education requirement prior to that relicensure. DC at this point does not have any requirement for licensure or anything like that. So sometimes it's prudent to actually hire someone, and most of the inspectors around here do work all the jurisdictions. You have to check that out. But if a guy's working in DC, or if a guy's working in Virginia and Maryland, there's a good chance he works in DC as well. Now, there are things to consider is that DC housing is different than Maryland and Virginia housing. A lot of the old row houses are not so easy to understand because they were built such a long time ago and don't follow the current standards as they exist. They're good quality homes, but they have to be understood. So if you're buying an older house in DC, a townhouse or row house rather, then you want to check the inspector's experience with that sort of thing as well. What's your recourse if the inspector misses something? Okay, so he is going to miss things. There is no way that he catches everything about the house. You're going to check the house from top to bottom in anywhere from 2 to 4 hours on average. He's going to check the outlets. He's going to check the windows. He's going to look at the roof. He's going to check the basement. He's going to run the water. He's going to check all the things that he can in the house. But there are thousands of components in the average house, and he can't get to everything. He's going to take a look, but he can't get to everything. So He's going to miss things. The question is it serious enough for you to worry about? So point out the things you have concerns about so he looks at them more closely than he might have otherwise. It's your money, it's your inspector. And so you want to know everything you can about the house to make sure your decision is done as educatedly as possible. Now, let's say he does miss something. Most of these inspectors have it set up that if you're not satisfied with the inspection or the results, you can get your money back. So you get your 4, 5, 600 bucks back. But what if it was something serious? Well, then you might be looking at a legal situation. Not always, but in most cases. They all have disclaimers and waivers and things like that. I did have an inspector some years ago who missed and didn't bring up to the buyer's attention that there was some staining that indicated the possibility of mold, which concerned the buyer of this home a lot. We did manage to get a few $1,000s out of the inspector to actually give to the buyer of the house so she could remediate the issue that was found. Haven't used that inspector since. In most cases, if there is something beyond getting your money back, you might have to resort to legal means, and you have to be aware of that. So, in summary, I think doing a home inspection is one of the smartest things that you can do when you're buying a house. And avoiding it or waiving it is probably one of the stupidest things. During the pandemic, it became very common to waive a home inspection contingency. And if you were smart, you at least got one that was abbreviated and got you as much data as you could. It might not have been full, you might not have had a great report with pictures, but you at least got information about the house that you could use to make your decision. So, yes, home inspection is very important. Next biggest thing is vet your inspector. Get someone that's licensed. In my estimation, I think that's the best way. And get one that is recommended. Whether you use the one your agent recommends or some friend recommends, I'll let you decide that. You can look online, there are reviews, that sort of things. Get a sample of their report. See if this guy fits what you want. Some of the old time guys are very thorough, but their paperwork's not so good. Some of the newer inspectors have these awesome reports with nice flashy pictures, but they don't talk very well. And so you don't get the flavor of what you're looking at. The biggest mistake that people make with regards to home inspections is not showing up, letting the agent there with the inspector, relying on the report. You need to be there. That's your biggest mistake. If you haven't attended the inspection, then you are making the biggest mistake of all. Then, once you've had it, make your choices, deliver your addendum, get done what you can get done, and have your agent leverage and strong arm as needed to get things done that need to be done. This is going to be your house. You're going to hopefully live in it for a long time. You want to not regret buying this house because of some serious issue that showed up later. At any rate, I hope this helps. If you have any questions, feel free to get in touch, and I look forward to it, and good luck with your purchase.